Hello, fellas. I hope you're having a good day. I've got kind of some crazy home movies I want to show you tonight. These are from last summer, before we had ever played around with putting anything on YouTube or ever even had any idea of it. So, for the most part, we don't even know what we're doing now, let alone back then. So it's a pretty wild camera. Filming are pretty poor, but to me anyway, or I think maybe to you guys, the subject matter, or the content is pretty interesting because we do a lot of mowing, burn down a couple big buildings with hot fire and flames, and tear down and bury stuff, and it's just some footage of that, and I like looking back on it and remembering how we cleaned up the place last summer. This was my dad's place and my uncle's place back in South Dakota, both of which had passed away. And my brother and I went back there to clean it up, but I'll show you some video and explain it as we go here. Thanks for watching, fellas, and I hope you guys are having a good day.
Now, as I said, these are some home movies that we made last summer, and you know, the camera's shaky and things are pretty wild, and the editing is highly questionable because they're just home movies. And at the time, we didn't have any thoughts of YouTube or sharing them with anybody other than family. But they're interesting to me, and they're neat. I like looking at them, and so I figured I would share them with you. And so if you would, just forgive the wildness with the camera shaking around. But what we did is last summer, we went back to my dad's place in South Dakota and my Uncle Fred's, which is right next door. And my brother and I had to do, or thought that we needed to do, a lot of cleaning up. And so that's me and the Bobcat excavator, and that's my brother driving his Kubota tractor, and he's got a 5-foot brush hog on the back. And in this particular video, we're pushing an old 30 or 35-year-old shed, pushing it up towards the burn pile, and then trying to dismantle it and tear it apart here so we can burn it. The burn pile is up on the hill, and everything else is a kind of an overgrown sea of grass, beautiful grass. But at the time, we didn't know what kind of railroad ties or concrete blocks or this or that was stuck in the grass. So my brother ended up mowing a lot of it down carefully with his pallet forks down on the ground in front of him, so he could try not to mow over debris. And then once we got it all mowed, so we could see what there was and get it picked up. But there's me trying to get that thing busted apart, so I could stuff it in the burn hole better and burn it. Now this is kind of some wild footage here. This is from my dad's brother Fred, and this is an abandoned farm site that's down the road from my dad's, that it was also something that we needed to do to clean it up. Now you're seeing the original old ramshackle barn. We're burning it down, and then to the right there, that's the old farmstead house that's on fire as well. And I know it's hard to believe probably, but both of those were way, way, way beyond saving. Just horrible, you know, dirty, vermin infested, roof collapsing, you know, ceiling falling down, kind of a deal in there. And so we made the decision that the easiest way to clean those up was to burn them down, and then dig up the footings and the concrete, you know, anything that was close enough to the surface, and dig a hole and bury it. And so this is the day that we set those buildings on fire, and probably several others, and burned them up. And then it took a couple days after that of digging holes and pushing dirt and burying things. But there was actually quite a bit of old hay, probably, for all I know, 8 or 10 years old plus hay in that barn to the left there, and that no good for feeding animals anymore, you know, and vermin in there, etc. But that caused it to burn even hotter. You could feel the heat coming off those two buildings from quite a distance away. And then my brother's over here later on in this video running around trying to get this grass mowed down so we could find the debris in there and clean it up. The power that comes in on that power line's already been disconnected by the electric cooperative there. Rosebud Electric Cooperative is what they call it back there. But the first step was to set these buildings on fire and start gathering up steel and debris and objects and just everything you could and make a pile of anything that wouldn't burn. And then, for the most part, burn anything that would burn and bury it. Right here is actually where that house used to be. This part of the video is probably a day and a half, 2 days later after things cooled down. And right where my brother's tractor is, that orange Kubota, that's where that house stood. Pretty close there. And we've already got it burned and buried. And then that smoldering metal on the left side of the screen is anything that wouldn't burn. I just tried to grapple it and throw it off to the side. You can see my brother running around with the brush hog still on his counterweight, but he's helping me smooth stuff off. There's our steel pile. That's one of them. We've got several of them over there. But anything that was steel or tin, and probably there's a few things that we should have salvaged that we didn't. But we just our goal was to make a pile, and then we could try and have the local junk man or steel men haul that off for us. In older, better times when steel was worth more, like back in 07, 09, and in there we probably could have got paid some money for this steel, but right now and last summer, steel is not a very good price in our area. And normally I could haul this to the steel yard myself, but this particular location is 150 to 200 miles from where I live, where I've made my adult life, you know, and so I can't economically run back that far to make any money on hauling that steel to the steel yard for what it's worth. There's a 20 or 25-year-old mound of gravel, it used to be, that's turned into dirt, that was in front of my dad's big shed. Dad passed away several years ago, and since we had the equipment back there, I figured I'd flatten it out and smooth it off.